We are excited to welcome Diane Leonard to the Nonprofit Productivity Summit. And Diane, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today to teach us. And why don't we start by introducing yourself to our audience and who you are, exactly what your firm does. And then we'll start getting into this whole thing of agile and taking the mystique out of that so that we can help people work smarter and better in their nonprofits.
Yeah, Mike, thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be a part of your summit. I'm so excited to learn from the other speakers as well. And so, a little introduction to me. So my first love in nonprofits, I spent my entire career in the nonprofit sector. A little prop for you. It's actually about grants. I love all things grants. And I actually started as a grant maker. But I thought, well, this is hard and stressful work. I'd like to make it less stressful for people. And so switched to being a grant seeker and quickly learned that I love working with a wide range of organizations on building their grant readiness, their capacity around grants. So started D.H. Leonard Consulting 16 years ago. My, how time flies when you're having fun. And along the way, part of my degree, I'd had classes in organizational behavior, was always thinking like one of the hats I wear as a grant professional is about project management, being a leader who serves the team. All that felt natural, but had never had exposure to what was agile and specifically the Scrum framework. And so about 6 years ago, had this moment where we were trying to figure out an audiobook to listen to on a trip. And we listened to The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. And all of a sudden, there was more room in my heart for a second professional passion. And it was all about agile, the agile mindset, the Scrum framework. And so a few years ago, we added a program under D.H. Leonard Consulting of Agile in Nonprofits. So we do teaching and coaching so that we're helping nonprofits find inspiration in the agile mindset in specific frameworks, but also more than not, we're often helping to give a label to the way they've been operating as they think about what's the best way to manage people and volunteers and boards and huge grant applications, whatever it might be. So if you can't tell, there's a lot of passion that has connected. What to me feels like, I love peanut butter and jelly. So to me, they go together that well. But it's absolutely our entire team's focus to not let grant stress you out, to not let project management stress you out. So those go together. One other tiny tidbit about me, in order to really honor the don't let things stress you out, we love to talk about what we do to complete the stress cycle, avoiding burnout. So that means lots of running or biking and thoughtful drinking of coffee. Not like, oh my gosh, I need caffeine drinking of coffee. So the good news for you and your summit participants, both those things have happened today. So I can't wait for you to, let's hear what you've got for questions. I'm so excited to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to follow up on the grants, what was it about grants that was so intriguing and kind of drew you in? Was it the prospect of meeting a need with an organization and then watching that need be met, or what was it? Was it the relationship that formed between the seeker and the grant agency?
That's a good question. So it was the idea that everyone has great ideas. I believe, right? Any nonprofit, you have these great passionate ideas, and the idea that you could have the great idea to do good, to create impact, to create change, and that someone who had the means, family foundation, government agency, whatever type of means they are, but someone could say, I agree. So instead of going like the VC for-profit route of that idea, but to say we can create change in our community. So we can use our word for good. We can try to engage others in our great organizations, our great mission. So I think that's really what I've always loved about grants, seeing that change that gets created.
Okay. And I've applied for many grants through my nonprofit organizations, and we've gotten some, we haven't gotten others. And it's definitely, we could probably have a whole nother conversation or two or three just about that, because sometimes you leave and you walk away and you're feeling pretty pumped up and excited. And other times it's just sort of, dead silence and you're wondering, what did I do wrong? So, but anyways, let's pivot to Agile. And I would imagine there's a lot of folks who are in the summit who have had some exposure to it, but probably a lot haven't. And my sense is, like you were saying, there are a lot of pain points in how teams work that Agile, I think, can help and can address. So let's take the mystique out of it. What is Agile? Is Scrum a framework? Is it a subset of Agile? Are they cousins? Let's talk about Kanban. So you just put us in the student seat and you be the professor for a few minutes about Agile.
Sure, I'll do my best. So when we think about Agile, what does that mean, right? What are people thinking? What comes to mind? And so I like to usually do like a word association. When I say Agile, what comes to mind for you? And some of the common answers are people are thinking about speed. People are thinking about being nimble, flexible. Occasionally we'll start to get some like intellectual acuity type responses so that it's not all a physical type word association. But if we think about what Agile is, and we're talking capital A Agile as defined in the Agile Manifesto, there's 4 values that are outlined there. And that's what, if you say, we're an Agile team, I'm an Agile business owner, I'm an Agile executive director, those values are what you are saying, I uphold what I believe in, what I follow, what I try to work in our organization or our team. So really, it's a mindset. If we're talking about values, it's a way that we think about how we might operate. And do you need to memorize the 4 values to be Agile? No, it's not. I was a Girl Scout leader many years ago when my daughters were younger. We don't need to memorize it. It's not a pledge like that. But what I find is that in those 4 values, it's the 4th of the values that so many nonprofits are embracing and living every day without knowing that they're being Agile. And the 4th value, you're like, what is it? It's responding to change over following a plan. Nonprofits, I believe, have those that thrive and grow and are creating great change in their community. They've always embodied that. They've got to respond to change with a funder. They have to respond to changing community needs. But then a little something like the pandemic happened, and nonprofits really upped their game and thought, all right, we've got to start, full telehealth in 5 days? No problem. All the students are at home instead of in person for first Lego League practice. We've got this, right? There are countless examples of how nonprofits lived this value. Okay, so now we know that Agile, it's a mindset, it's a way of operating. We've got 4 values. If you want to read more, agilemanifesto.org has the whole thing. You can read it all for free. But if nothing else, now you know that 4th value, that's going to be right here for us. So then what in the world is Scrum, Kanban, XP? There's all these words and these acronyms. What are they? So if we think of Agile as an umbrella, so the mindset, the values, that's our umbrella. There are many frameworks that help organizations, it's a buzzword, but I'll use it, to operationalize their Agile way of thinking, their Agile way of working. And so Scrum is a framework. It's a 25-year-old framework that was co-created by Dr. Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber. And those 2 individuals are also part of the group that wrote that original Agile Manifesto back in 2001. So there's a ton of linkages between that mindset and the values and the framework. You mentioned Kanban. That's another specific framework. There's even a hybrid. There's Scrumban. So there's different reasons that some teams thrive using a specific type of framework. Kanban can be amazing. Many people, they actually visually recognize Kanban, but don't have the label for it. The most common visualization of it, a board that says to do, doing, and done. As an Enneagram 3, so an achiever, as a type A, I was like, I love it. I like to put things on to-do lists, cross them off, moving them to done. It gives me such endorphins. It's great. The Scrum framework, there's more to it than only a board. Not that that's all there is about Kanban, but the Scrum framework, it turns out there are countless examples of nonprofits and great case studies using Scrum. So people thought, it's only for software teams because that's where it originated. But that's not the case at all. We have examples of churches, higher ed, healthcare, small grassroots organizations, environmentally focused carbon reduction organizations. You name it, We found examples, small teams, big teams. And again, some have a label that goes with it. Others, it's just the way that they have come into working that they found worked best for their team. The thing to remember about the framework is that it's helping teams to put into place practices that ensure that that value, responding to change over following a plan, interaction with our customers and clients over just lots of documentation, it helps ensure that those values are kept front and center with our team. Because honestly, why do people work in nonprofits? Last I knew, it wasn't usually because of the pay, but it's because they're heart-centered, they're focused on the mission, they're driven by the work that's being done and the impact that's created. So while the book that originally got me excited, Twice the Work in Half the Time, I would guess that no one on your summit is like, please give me more work. People don't say that.
Yeah.
Instead, people are like, oh, but twice the impact in half the time, I could spend the same number of hours or maybe less and still create this kind of change or more. That's why you might consider something like Scrum or Kanban to help make sure that those agile values never leave your team.
So why do we call it Scrum? Why that particular word?
Well, I'll channel Dr. Sutherland for it's not an acronym, right? It's not software, but I'm not really good with sports, I'll be honest. I love running and cycling, but like organized team sports, I didn't know that in rugby, the starting formation was a scrum.
Ah.
So you can actually, if you go like out on YouTube and just take a quick peek at what's happening when a rugby team comes together, they're gathered around a ball. I think they call it a ball, but they're gathered and they're moving it in one direction towards their end zone. So think about what that would mean then in an organization, in a team. How do we come together around our work and move it towards our goal? And hence, that's my version of like, why do we call it Scrum?
All right, no, that helps because I figure there are people on the summit who are wondering, what the heck, where do we get that word? So let's take my nonprofit. We're a professional association of folks who work in the college space, and our little staff of 3 full-timers with a bunch of very part-time contractors around the country. We realized a couple of years ago that we never felt like we were done. We felt like we really couldn't appreciate when we accomplished something significant, whether it was an event or a grant or whatever. And it just kept spinning. And so we said a couple of years ago, we're going to take the whole year and we're going to take 10 blocks of 5 weeks. Okay, a couple extra weeks in there, and we're going to then identify what are our key activities within those 5-week blocks and then map out the whole year. And in some ways, it sounds like maybe we were doing Agile and didn't know it. What do you think?
I think that you might be right. So when we think about, I'll talk specifically about the Scrum framework to help with this answer. So when we think about what organizations are doing for how they're organizing their work, how they're coming together towards a goal, what I'm hearing is I'm like, oh, so you thought about the big goals and initiatives. You probably didn't know all the minute details of the things you do in week 42 or 47, right? But you laid out what are the things we want to do as we work on achieving our mission and our vision. So you had a product backlog, the things the team would draw from over the course of our upcoming year. And then if you were thinking in 5-week chunks, you were saying we'll deliver things of value on a 5-week cadence. Okay, so you had a sprint length of 5 weeks, and the work you committed to as a team in those 5 weeks sounds an awful lot like a sprint backlog. The things that we are firmly committed to in the period of those 5 weeks. All right, I'd say you had some pretty good starts there to a Scrum framework going. Now, may I ask you a question about what that was like? Did the things you originally thought would happen in week 41, 49, did they all happen exactly when you thought they would and in the way you thought they would?
No, and what we learned to do is we would indicate when we needed to make a change so that we could look back in the, when we plan for the future and say, let's remember that when we hit week 30, things needed to be a little bit different. So that was helpful, but of course, it wasn't exactly how we scripted it.
Yeah. Life happens, right? And
Yep,
sometimes
yep.
something you learned in week 3 is going to influence week 33. So that's the activity of backlog refinement in Scrum. The idea that we plan to be more than dangerously ready, but we plan just the right amount so that we can get the work done, have a short-term forecast that's ready. So if we could grab something extra, or, oh, that partner's ready to work with us right now, we're ready. But then what we're learning, what we're engaged with from our partners, our own team, then we can use it to continuously modify and refine. Because what if you thought this was going to be something that we're going to have to do this in week 46? But based on the feedback we've gotten from our members, we actually don't even need to do it, right? Well, because it's on the plan, do we have to do it? No, right? We can set that aside. But if we had over-planned all the details and who's going to do what on week 41 at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, if we had over-planned to that level, okay, maybe I'm making it sound extreme. Now we'd have to spend time replanning and cleaning things up. So it's really about finding the balance. What's the responsible level of planning for your team? I love your description, though. That's fantastic. Let's put some good labels to it. I think you are definitely showing agile mindset and some indicators of even the Scrum framework.
We're trying. I mean, it's made a difference because at least we have a sense of what are we supposed to be working on in this block of 5 weeks. Now, here's where I think we struggle. And this is fun because, people are really getting a look behind the scenes of a real nonprofit and that's trying to get better and more effective and more efficient. What I've found is that I feel like our first week and our last week should be more potent than they are. I guess in my mind, I think, well, the first week of a sprint, we should be ramping up and getting clear and specific about what we want to accomplish. And maybe the last week, we want to be starting to land the plane, celebrating, assessing, communicating back. But I think those are two areas that we still need to improve a lot on. Have you seen that in other nonprofits?
Yes, on a broad level based on what you've described. And I think, part of it, even if we were talking about, because if we're talking about the Scrum framework, the recommended sprint length is between 1 and 4 weeks. So 5 is just outside of that. But the reason that those lengths are suggested and how teams decide is based on how long does it take to produce something of value that you can get feedback on. So if you're talking about a ramp up period and a kind of wind down period, if that's what feels like the natural pulse that your 5-week sprint creates, if it's consistent every sprint, I don't think that that's a problem. It might just be like the rhythm of the team. I think that in trying to maybe not have maybe as steep of an up or down, if it feels steep to you, it might be an indicator on the front side that because it's a ramp up period, we don't know enough. We haven't committed and planned and talked about the work enough before it starts. And so maybe we need to sprint planning needs to be a little stronger and our refinement needs to have some more criteria about, is it testable? Are we sure it's valuable? Maybe we need to have some more of those conversations before we click go on the next 5-week sprint. That might be a way to shorten the ramp up. And on the backside, if it feels like a ramp down, maybe you're actually ready to produce and provide something that you're looking for feedback on. That's like your next product increment. You might be ready actually before the 5 weeks, if it feels that way. They're all guessing items, right? It's hard to tell, but on the other hand, the fact that if it feels consistent for how your team operates, the reason that people enjoy often the sprint, regardless of what length the organization or team settles on, it becomes your heartbeat for the way that the organization operates. And so it just is. If you think about, I mentioned I'm a runner and I'm a cyclist. So it's a good thing I did that, because if I'm thinking about being on a Peloton or a Nordic type bike, anything like that, what do they build in to classes like that? A warm up and a cool down. It's what makes your workout sustainable. So it could be also that your team's experiencing some of that. The great part, whether it's Scrum or Kanban, any of the frameworks, they have their rule book. Like, what does it mean? So in Scrum, it's a 13-page PDF that tells you the basics. So what does it mean to say we do this framework? Then there's the playbook. What does it look like in your organization? And so it might be that that's kind of just the playbook for how the team operates. But I have another question for you. I love to do this back. You're like, oh, this is backwards. You used one of my favorite words in talking about how your team operates in that 5 weeks. You mentioned celebrating. And so maybe, yeah, there's a ramp up and there's a ramp down. But if the team is meeting their goal and having the chance to succeed together, like, oh, okay, the team that finishes early, they're going to accelerate faster. They're going to be happier. Happier teams perform better. It's a leading indicator on performance. So I'm like, ooh, if you're having the chance to succeed, to meet goals, I don't know. I'm like, that sounds like a pretty good thing.
So how do you take a nonprofit leader, let's say they come to you and they say, Diane, our staff is just, we're exhausted. You know, we're constantly spinning these plates. We're under-resourced. We just have too much to do. We're always chasing our tails. Are those the kinds of things that you hear and you say, Agile could make a dent in this? Or are there other things that you hear from nonprofit leaders that are maybe like flags that Agile could be a part of their working better solution?
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head with that one. One of the books right here behind me, The Happy, Healthy Nonprofit, co-authored by Beth Cantor and Eliza Sherman. I think it's been around 4 years now. It's one of the, well-known books now talking about burnout in the nonprofit field. Why? Everybody's got their dinner plate and their dinner plate is always overflowing, and nonprofit professionals are doing heroic things. Whether we're talking about, I'm being asked to apply for more grants, but I don't have any extra hours and I don't even have an intern, or we are having to serve more people in our hot meal program than ever before, yet we don't have any extra funders, or we need more volunteers, right? There's always like, how do we do more with less or more with the same? So those are some of the flags of what's happening with burnout and team commitment. The passion is there, but there's a limit to how many heroic things can or should be done. We need to operate at a sustainable pace and care for ourselves. Actually, I'm thinking of Ian Adair, he's an executive director for an organization in Florida focused on mental health, but is truly like traveling the nonprofit circuit, speaking at conferences, talking about mental health and focusing on it for the nonprofit professionals. Anyway, a little bit of a soapbox, because they are indeed red flags to say, whoa, what can we do differently? But the risk is, okay, here's Agile as a value, as a mindset. Here's the Scrum framework, magic pill, silver bullet, fairy dust. We've got you covered. It takes time, and there's already so much happening that the issue that comes up with any change management, if you say to an executive director or a vice president or just a person in a nonprofit team who's like trying to do things differently, if you say, okay, please implement this whole framework, please implement 3 roles and 5 events and 3 artifacts, then we'll be all good. They're going to look at you like a deer in headlights, right?
Right.
So the thing that I really encourage organizations to think about is to find inspiration from an element of the framework, an element of the values. Was talking with a staff member at a community foundation once, and they learned the whole framework. They heard what it was, and they were trying to figure out, how do we translate it? How do we make it? We were on Zoom together. She was the only one in the office. She said, let me take you on a quick tour. All right. We end up in their main office space, and she said, well, this is our WIG board. Your WIG board? Yes, our wildly important goal board. We gather here every Monday to talk about our progress towards our big goals. I was like, oh my gosh, same as with your story. I'm like, yes, very agile. I see a big product backlog. I see that you're coming together every week to make a conversation, have a conversation, commit to the goal. Sounds an awful lot like sprint planning. Team hands in, sprint goal, here we go. Like, no pressure. You don't need to implement the whole framework. Let's you already have part. Now, what's the next item that you think will add value, right? Just pressure to find one thing. If you want to change just one idea as a hypothesis, Let's try that. So when I hear those red flags, you don't want to you don't want to add more stress to what's already happening, right? Find something that feels like, oh, or like when some of the nonprofit leaders we've interviewed, I'm thinking Alice Ferris with the Lowell Observatory talked about how they used sprints in their capital campaign. Now, is that example going to inspire all nonprofit professionals? No, not everybody cares about capital campaigns, right? But if a nonprofit professional who's in that space is trying to figure it out, they might go, oh, okay, I remember how Alice did it. That could inspire me to try something, right? So it's about connecting and finding what feels comfortable for the team, not putting more pressure on for change management.
No, that's super helpful. Is there a general rule or a guideline in terms of the amount of time that the average nonprofit might take to adopt Agile? I mean, I'm sure there's no one answer, but are we talking 2 months, 3 months, 6 months?
They often get labeled as agile transformations. Doesn't that sound delightful? It also sounds like it might take a long time, like potentially rolling out a new donor development software, right? I'm like, ooh, just want to be careful. We've seen some that dive right in and they say, and it's honestly, it's based on like leadership approach, team culture for how they might do it. And we're like, I'm coming to a class and I'm going to learn it all. And then when we leave on Monday, this is it. And they're learning, like the journey has only just started, but they just dive right in. Others have a slower journey. It's more of a Sunday drive style journey. And it's about finding inspiration and trying one idea. And then in another 3 weeks, trying another idea and so on and so forth. So the journey itself actually never ends. So I would never expect that their transformation would be done because an organization always has room to improve. And as team members come in and out, their team can always think of new ways to improve how they work together. So it'll always, you're like, that doesn't make people feel better. The journey never ends. No, it's more like if you think of martial arts and how you are like advancing through a belt system, even once you get the black belt, you're still learning and advancing. Agile is the same idea because people and teams are dynamic and the situation's changing. And I share that actually not to stress people out, but to say, give yourself grace. There's no pressure that this is a one-day transformation. I go to this class, I do this thing, magic. You will constantly be learning and improving using those values. That's really the bigger point.
And I would say for our organization, it's very satisfying just to get started and get along the way. And you will see some results just from getting started. We have David Allen, author of Getting Things Done, is also on the summit. And GTD is in some ways similar in that you never fully get there. You can always get better, growth mindset. And that's really encouraging because life throws things at us and it's unpredictable. And we've had a pandemic. I mean, it's sort of this classic example of you got to be flexible. Diane, how about technology? Is this just a set of human behaviors that can be done through meetings and face-to-face interactions, or are there some packages of software that could help with adopting some of these agile mindsets?
Yeah, there's a number of digital tools. There were many pre-pandemic. There are, it seems to be more. They've had lots of reasons to really put their systems to the test and to get a lot of user feedback. So it used to be our team, 16 years, fully remote. But sometimes we'd have team members in or out, or we'd come together for planning sessions. And so I love a good sticky note. I'll be careful. I'm not sponsored by anyone. Would love to be, right? But
not yet.
Not yet. But so we have sticky notes everywhere. And if something stands still, I'm like, oh, that would make a good retro board. Oh, that'd be a perfect place for me to brainstorm some of these like ideas that are in the backlog. Love just standing at a whiteboard with a team member or a whole team and brainstorming, talking about priorities, working out ideas. But since that's not always possible, pandemic or not, the tools are amazing. You can there's multiple boards or tools, I should say, that have like a whiteboard system to them. there's Miro, there's Mural, there's the Post-it app. There's even now a whiteboard section in many of the larger tools. I can't even keep up with all the things happening in those. But you can play just like you would at a whiteboard. But you're where you are and I'm where I am, and we still have that shared visual communication and understanding, which we wouldn't have if we just typed into something. But then if you really start to think about like documenting work, moving along backlog items, you've got Jira, which has amazing data reporting qualities. You've got ClickUp, Trello, Asana. I'm sure I missed a dozen. There's so many. Like our marketing and training coordinator has a whole video on YouTube walking through just a few of them, showing how nonprofits have built backlogs in them. And it's like I said, there's just constantly things. And so how do you decide which tool is best, right? It's like the same question. What's the best CRM for our nonprofit to have? I don't endorse any one. We have subscriptions in many of them because they're awesome for different reasons, or different clients use one, so we play in one. It really is about what's your goal? What are you trying to do? What's your team culture? There's amazing tools, but you don't want to let the tool drive your agile journey.
Yeah.
Rather, it's just part of what will support you so that the work is visible. If you don't care so much, don't think about what the name of the tool is. Just always think about it as a way to make your work visible to the team. So it's not hidden on someone's personal computer. It doesn't matter who's in or out for the day. It doesn't matter what city or state you're in or what country, but it's just a mechanism to make your work visible. So I love all the new tech stuff. When I really am at still, and then I just take a picture of it and put it in the tool and let it read my bad handwriting. It works great.
Yeah. Is that something that you'd say you really do need to have, though, a tool, a place to park ideas and send things back and forth?
Some place where you can, so like when we come together, let's say that you and I were going to come together and we wanted to talk about something that's going to happen 3 sprints from now. So you and I are talking, that is the richest form of communication for us to talk to each other, versus if I typed in a Word document and then I sent it to you and then you gave feedback and you sent it back, right? That's really low on the richness of communication scale. But so as you and I are talking, I mean, all right, I also love to have my handwritten notes, helps me remember things. So I'm writing my handwritten notes, you're handwriting yours, or maybe you're typing yours, you're on your iPad, whatever, right? But they're in our spaces. So now we can't see if we really have shared understanding. We've got duplication of notes. So the tool or the space, whether it's like at a whiteboard with the stickies, or the tool is giving us a place to have that visible work so that nothing's hiding. That way we can ensure, what you described, I thought was going to have like 10 times more work. I thought it was going to have all these other tasks, but the way you outlined it in a way I can see it, now I have better understanding, right? It also catches those moments, but it helps eliminate some of those silos that we see in so many well-intentioned teams.
I was hoping you would say that, just because I was talking to somebody the other day, someone who lives in my house, my better half, and she was talking about her team. And I said, I think you need to have some common tool that everyone can use, because otherwise everyone's using their own tools and it's really hard to work at the highest level that way. So thank you, Diane, for backing me up there.
Let's talk about being actually in houses. One of my favorite ways to encourage nonprofit professionals to think about some of this work is actually try it in your own life. Try it using it as like, okay, what are the big things we want to get done fixing the house? We're trying to get ready to move. Let's make a backlog. Let's do it together. We're trying to plan for the Thanksgiving meal. We're trying to plan for Rosh Hashanah. Whatever it might be that's coming up for you, come up with something to try. Try using Post-its. Try using a tool. It takes it out of the pressure of the workspace and gives you an opportunity in like maybe a lower pressure way. Right? Grab a free subscription, just do a trial to ClickUp, do a quick trial to Asana, try it out. And then that way, when you bring it into your workspace, you'll feel more comfortable, because any new thing we're learning as a tool, there's a learning curve, right? It'll take us a minute. We might stumble. So practicing in our own day-to-day work, our daily life can be helpful.
I love that because there's a lot of projects, even in our personal lives. Diane, how about meetings? In an agile framework, are there some non-negotiable or highly recommended types of meetings that should happen within a sprint?
Mhm. So we'll talk specifically about the Scrum framework, right? So because if Agile's our mindset and our values, there's no specific, like, what do we have to do with it? So for the Scrum framework, there are 5 events. We don't call them meetings. Who wants another meeting? I get it. It's just a naming thing. But there are events. And to say we are a Scrum team, we follow the Scrum guide, those are our rules that we follow, that means we have 5 events. And actually, the sprint is an event. So like your 5-week sprint, you've already been doing a Scrum event. Daily Scrum, coming together every 24 hours to check in on progress, not to get a progress report, but to talk about who needs help. Do we have any impediments towards meeting our sprint goal? Actually, before we even do daily Scrum, we've got our sprint planning. What are we committing to for the sprint ahead? Then we have our sprint review. What is it we are presenting for feedback that we have created as a team towards our goal in this sprint? We might produce more than just one thing that we could get feedback on, but at least one thing. So that's sprint review. And then my favorite 5, sprint retrospective. Let's talk about a team. We've had our work inspected, adapted. We're thinking about how to modify it. Based on this last sprint that we're just wrapping up, what went well? What didn't go so well? What could we improve? And what is one hypothesis that we want to test in the next sprint that might make us better, faster, happier? That event, that is what drives an increase in impact from a team. The rest all help you get the work done, which is really important to meet your mission. But the retrospective is what helps the team be better. It takes some teams some practice. They might be used to like a post-mortem, but that's usually focused on the work, not on the way the team works together. So sometimes though, teams are like, oh, we do post-mortems. And so they're excited to try a retrospective. Great. If that gives you the inspiration to feel comfortable, try it. Do that before you test anything else. Absolutely. But yeah, so 5 events. If you're saying you do Scrum, those are the 5. Unless you're like, as I said before, getting started on the journey, no pressure to do all 5. Pick one, try one. And now I'm like, Mike, so we already know you do one of the events. You'll have to report back. Like, what might you try next as a team? What might you find to be, what's going to be of value, right? That's the question.
Yeah, super helpful. Should the manager, the nonprofit leader, the supervisor, should he or she do each of those events just with direct reports or with the whole group or the whole team?
So that's one of those it depends questions, because an ideal Scrum team is between 3 to 9 people, 3 to 10. If you're a nonprofit that is that size, well, that's your nonprofit team is the Scrum team. But in larger organizations, the team is not really necessarily org chart driven, but rather about what are we creating focused. And so there might be multiple teams that come under one executive director, right? So that's a Scrum at scale, and it looks different in each organization for who's part of the teams, how are the teams driven. But the point of them is that each team has priorities that they're focused on, they have their backlog, and they're getting and having vision and priority given from the organization to them. So it'll look different in each one, but that's really what Scrum at scale means. You've got multiple Scrum teams and vision and priority is coming from a leader in the organization.
For the daily huddle, how long should that be? Is that simply, here's what I'm working on, or is it I'm seeking feedback? Is this a short kind of quick hitting thing? And then also, how about if your team is spread out over multiple time zones?
Ooh, all the questions and such good ones. Okay, good news. Daily Scrum, 15 minutes or less. I was on once that was 4 minutes. Great. Bye. Have a good day, everybody. Good to see you. what is the point of coming together? It is not for folks on the team to say, so since we last met, I did this, 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 and this. We know and trust that everybody on the team is really busy and doing things of value towards meeting a sprint goal. No worries there. The team should be saying instead, okay, based on the priorities that we know, this top priority item, how can we all help move this to done? Let's get stuff done. How can we move that to done? Instead of leaving it in progress, in process, how can we move it to done? Can we do something together? Do we just need to ask one person a question and then it'll be ready? Or is there something that's blocking us, something that's impeding us that maybe we need to go to the executive director, or we need board approval, or we need a collaborative partner, right? Like, what is it? So the point of it is to figure out how we can move top priority items to done. What are some of those blockages that we need help with? Anybody and everybody on the team that's doing work who's available should be there. But you're on vacation, you're sick, it happens. Not everybody's always there, but we still have that conversation. And in terms of then, so we've got our timeline, we've got what we're talking about at the daily scrum. What is going to happen when something comes up? It takes more discussion. People are like, my daily scrums are they're actually taking like 45 minutes. No, firm time box. If things come up and you're like, we need to have a bigger discussion. Okay, we're going to have the 16th minute in our parking lot. Those that want to stay, that need to stay, let's quick come up with a plan. Are we going to schedule a time to talk about it? Are we actually going to carve out 20 minutes? Do we need to call someone? What else do we need to do? That's the way that we still keep it in 15 minutes. Right?
Okay.
Now let's talk about time zones, or just even distributed teams, even in the same time zone. Video with a shared screen of our backlog, regardless of time zones or not. That is an absolute for having the richest communication and shared understanding. When we're across multiple time zones, the team has to decide what is the appropriate time that works best for all so that we're meeting at the same time. One of our teams is across 3 time zones, 2 p.m. Eastern. That is what, after some trial and error, that is the magic time. Some teams say, well, we're actually across like such international time zones. Some are coming in while others are leaving. And so they find the right time for that so that there's a little teeny tiny bit of overlap, not really a handoff, but just to make sure that there's no gaps in terms of like an impediment or something. So it does take some trial and error, but regardless of what time the team picks, still 15 minutes, still when allowable, when tech's going to work in our favor, videos on, backlog, work that's visible up on the screen for everybody.
And what should an individual team member prepare for that particular event? I mean, so it sounds like you're saying it's not just, I did this yesterday and I did that yesterday. So what should they come prepared to say and talk about?
No, they should definitely have a full progress report ready every time. Okay, no, I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. I was like, no, they shouldn't prepare anything. They know their work. The work is visible to the team. They should come ready to answer questions, ask questions, offer to help. Everybody should come ready to interact. That's it. You know your work. There's nothing you need to prove that you did. There's no, okay, I bring this ticket. I bring that. Nope. I come ready to be a part of the team and to be a part of the discussion.
And who?
Maybe you want to bring coffee or water. That's it.
There you go. Or a pet. We've got dogs on our team in the background. They're not on Zoom. But how about, is there a need for a facilitator? I mean, just somebody who's going to say, Susan, you're up. Joe, you're up. Or no, it's more organic than that?
So as you implement the Scrum framework, the Scrum Master would be the usual role within the team that would facilitate, really more so because they're keeping track of the time box to make sure that the team's aware and doesn't go past. There isn't a need to hear from everyone in that daily Scrum. So you don't need to ensure that all voices have been asked, what did you do since we last met? Because if it's all about getting the priority work done, what do we need to do to help each other? What impediments? It's a natural conversation. Sometimes you might hear from everyone. Sometimes it might be 2 or 3 people who are leading more of the conversation. And others are weighing in or offering ideas or saying, I can't help today. If I can help tomorrow morning, how can I help you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? What can I do to help then? So there's a lot of give and take, and each daily scrum should sound a little bit different as a result.
Okay, super helpful. Diane, you have put on the professor hat today and for this summit. I have learned so much, and I thought I knew some things about Agile. Maybe I did, but I am just so much richer for this conversation. So I just want to thank you. And I also want to give you the opportunity to promote and share with us some of the new, perhaps upcoming resources that you have and that your team's working on.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. It's been a lot of fun to chat with you. And thank you. You fielded some of my own questions right back at you. So this has been fun. So at agileandnonprofits.com, we have a number of free resources and downloads to help support nonprofits on their way in their Agile journey. We've got our YouTube channel where we interview nonprofit professionals, where they share their stories so that it's not hearing from me. It's one thing, yeah, put the hat on, let's train about it, sure. But you want to hear from other nonprofit professionals living it every day. And that's why we have those case studies. It's why we did our Agile and Nonprofit Summit. All those videos and recordings are completely free so that they can serve as inspiration. And then that way, when a nonprofit professional or a leader or a board member is like, okay, ready to formally learn. All right, well, we've got Scrum Basics. Come learn with us for 2 hours about what the framework is. 2 hours. You can decide, where am I going to start? We do that every month. Love to have folks join us for that. Some people then say, I'm ready to dig deep. Okay, we do credential classes. You can be a registered Scrum Master, a registered product owner. Love to see you in one of those public classes. But honestly, we want you to find inspiration in what is Agile. What does it mean for you and your team to be Agile? Is the Scrum framework right for you or not? Might not be. Might be that Kanban's perfect. But we want you to come find that inspiration, and our resources are there to help you along the way so that it feels comfortable, right? This isn't only a software thing. This isn't only a hardware thing. This is a nonprofit thing. And so that's really what we want to help support.
Diane, thanks for being on the summit. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.